Welcome back. So we started off the show by, zeroing in on the need for accountability, and why not ask critical questions in that regard about the economy, particularly now that there seems to be, an agreement with stakeholders about Nigeria's tax reforms bills. So we're going to be speaking to some stakeholders about whether or not it is Uhuru for the tax reform bills. Will they still be encountering opposition as the public hearing commences? Joining us for this very important conversation is the DG, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, Mr. Adewale Smart Oyeride, who joins us here in our Lagos studio. Thank you for joining us, sir. Good morning.
Thank you for having us once again.
We also have with us Mr. Aziz Alatoye. He's a vice chairman, CITN, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Taxation Standards and Practice Monitoring Committee of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, who joins us virtually from Lagos. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all Nigerians.
Thank you, sir. So I'll naturally start with you, Mr. Smart Oyeride. Before we begin to talk about the public hearing and what we may be getting from manufacturers and employers, let's reflect, first of all, on the GDP growth rate as announced by the National Bureau of Statistics. What is the position of NECA on this one?
Thank you once again. I think the NBC has faced some bashing of recent, starting from the issue of the unemployment rate, the rebasing or calculation of unemployment rate using the new international standards, which tends from some surface view, we can communicate that unemployment rate is reducing, but in the real context, it's not communicating that basically, because the new model of calculating those statistics have changed internationally. So they've received a bit of bashing, and that also trickles down to the issue of the rebasing of the GDP, as it were, and then the new GDP rate. Now the NBC's role is to pick the items.
Yes, the
NBS, pardon me, is to pick the items and then do the calculation, and then project from their calculation, from the 1 + 1 + 2 + 3 x + y, has given us this figure. It has done its bit. But in the real sense, if you look at it generally, has it really improved? Those are the key conversations that stakeholders are having. Within the context of the figures and the reality on ground, there's a bit of disconnect, which remain a concern for general stakeholders. As the NBC, NBS, and Bureau of Statistics has done its job, absolutely it's done its job. For us on the shop floor, for us the operators, has it really translated into real growth that we see? We probably will say no. Now, there's another context to it. If you look at where we're coming from, someone said if you find yourself in the hole, the first thing you stop doing is you stop digging. So when you stop digging, and you are trying to mop up yourself from the hole back to zero level, you are growing, but your growth is not visible. It's not real growth in the real context, but you are moving out of the hole until you get to zero level, ground zero. That's when we can now say progressively you are growing and your growth is now feasible. But while you are in the hole and trying to dig yourself out, are you growing? Absolutely, you are growing. So that might be the context in which the growth that we're currently experiencing it can be explained somehow. But in the real sense, in the real context of growth, in the real context of inflation rate coming down, then you go to the market, is the price of goods and services, is it coming down? Absolutely not. But are we moving in the right direction? We think we are.
Oh, okay. We're still in the hole, but we're trying to come out of the hole.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Let me bring the same to you, Mr. Alatoye. Particularly some of the indicators of the growth as identified by the NBS. Oil sector dropping from 12% to, I think, is it 4% now? And of course, the service sector contributing significantly to the growth that we're witnessing. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, thanks very much. And again, good morning, all Nigerians. So as the DG, had said, and let me expatiate, a little bit. there is a difference between growth, and movement in terms of the real growth. For instance, if in the oil industry, for example, if we say there is a growth in that industry, what do we really mean by that growth? Nigeria has about 2.5 million barrels that we are supposed to do according to OPEC, and we are doing about 1.8 million. So at a point in time, we dropped to about 900, came to 1.3 million, 1.6, and now 1.8 or thereabouts. If we've done 1.9, we will say, we have produced more. But have we even reached our OPEX quota? The answer is no. So the growth that we planned in the past was to move 2.5 million barrels to 4 million barrels. So if we, in real time, we want to say, oh, as Nigerian, we are growing from what we planned before, will be if we cross the 2.5 million barrels, in that industry. And this same is applicable to all other industries. We had a plan before where we are supposed to be, and we are not, in that place. So we are still moving within the band of what we planned to be several years ago. So, and that is why I'm saying, yes, there is movement, based on the statistics we have. But whether those statistics are up to where we are supposed to be is a different ball game entirely.
Mr. Very smart. Let's leave the GDP and the rest for a moment and come to the issue of tax, because I'm sure in the coming days the numbers will still be crunched, but we needed your responses as to, because that's the latest data from the MBS that measures all of these things. So
absolutely.
We've had stakeholders meeting and hearing at that hearing at the National Assembly as far as the tax reforms is concerned. It looks like there's a lot of progress, but one of the things I want to find out from you is when you look at those four bills, especially the first two, by that I mean the Nigerian tax bill and the Nigerian tax administration bill, from the point of an operator, what is missing that must be added before we can make progress? The last time we had a conversation, the permutation the governors did, they left off the CIT, say leave everything. They don't reduce the CIT, leave it the way it is. So what are you looking forward to as far as this bill is concerned?
Thank you once again. I think first of all, the committee itself, the presidential committee, the organized private sector was represented in the committee. Were represented by the secretariat of the OPS then. So the context and the scope of the whole work that was done by the committee, progressively we made significant input. And up to the whole consultation. In fact, in my adult life, I can remember, I think this is probably an item that has witnessed the largest of consultation. I've not seen any other conversation we've had in this country that witnessed this kind of wide, deep, and expansive consultation. So for us, it's more of what can you get in the context of the stakeholder engagement. What more can I get? How can I reduce my burden? So when the governors are saying the company income tax should be left and then the VAT should be increased for them, everybody is just trying to get what more can I get? What more relief can I get? What more burden can be taken off me within the context of this issue? But for us, I think significantly, once it is human, once the context involves human in any endeavor, you cannot expect a perfect outcome. So the context of us, if the CTN can still be reduced, if more reliefs can still be given to organized businesses and lighten self-interest, absolutely right. But for us, as far as this bill is concerned, it significantly addressed the critical issues, different from where we are coming from. When we say businesses are paying over 60, 70, 90 taxes, levies, and fees across board in 3 tiers of government, sometimes people think it's just statistics. That is the reality of it from research. So if this bill can significantly harmonize and reduce that multiplicity of taxes, then it will have done a great deal for all of us. One thing that we wish it can do more is to create a system where no levies can come in from the back door. Let me give you an instance. While we are still dealing with this issue of the tax bill, and we are still trying to harmonize the levies, harmonize all the things, you still have agencies of government still coming from the back door, still coming up with levies. We talk about the customs 4% for FOB levy. We talk about the Financial Reporting Council levies. So those are out of the context of this bill. You know why this conversation is going on. So those levies are still finding their way. One agency saying, look, I have the right to
the MPA.
Exactly. I have the right to do this. I have the right to, which basically negates the whole idea of harmonizing fees, levies, and taxes.
Mr. Alassane, I would like you to pick up from perhaps where he stopped. And I've looked at the bill, like all four of them, some part of it, and I've looked at also the explanation, quite lucidly explained by the leader of that team, trying to do his work as much as possible. But the concern has always been, we don't have a problem with pieces of legislation. Implementation is always a big headache. He's pointed out these 60 levies, harmonization. And sometimes when we look at some of the things that they said they will address, when you look at implementation, what do you see, Mr. Alassane?
Question. Firstly, let me join Mr. Adewale in appreciating the committee for a very comprehensive review of the Nigerian tax laws, and also an attempt to unify the tax law. I think that's a very great one. Also, reducing about 62 taxes to under 10 taxes, as we have it now. I think that's a very great idea. However, we need to put a yardstick for the measurement of performance. And after the tax bill is passed into law, three things are likely going to happen. And that's number one, is that we have growth in the economy, growth of both the companies as well as individuals in terms of moving individuals from poverty to prosperity as a result of this law. The second possible option is for us to have stagnation, meaning that we still remain within the bracket of where we are. And the third possible one is actually to have a retardation, which we don't pray for, and that is that things will really go down than the way it was. I think the general expectation is that we are likely going to have growth, from these bills, the four bills, put together. We are likely going to have growth. However, it has to be all inclusive. There are some other areas, that we need to look at. I think I've been enumerating the areas which are very fantastic, fine, which the committee, has done. There are some other areas we need to look into. And let me just pick one or two of them. For instance, we used to have a free trade zone, which technically has been, like abolished by this law, except just, some few things there. If we abolish that, we need to look at how it's going to impact in that industry. Probably have more dialogue, with the special economic zone as it were, and see how probably can still be having some FDI into that zone by having discussion with them. The second one probably we want to look at is the oil industry again. If you look at chapter 3 there, in section 77, that talks about filing of tax returns, on account of equity. You give a license to a Nigerian, and foreign persons are funding that, and those who are funding are not going to be filing returns. It's the person who is having the license by way of equity that is going to be filing the returns as against the economic, basis of filing returns before. This is likely going to impact negatively. And so we need to look at these areas and see how, at the end of the day, we don't have either retardation in some sectors or retrogression in some sectors, whereas we would definitely have growth in some sectors. Right. The other one we need to look at probably is the sector. So, which means that we need to look at the education sector very critically instead of taxing education sector, because we are going again to health. Right. If we tax education sector, I don't really think that probably will be a nice thing, and we have to review that as well.
I just want to do a quick follow-up, because I understand the VAT for now is 7.5. Some have said let it stay at 7.5, but the goal, at least for government, is to have that incremental plan till 2030 to about, what is it, 15% now. But my challenge is today, if you go to some places to purchase things, you get 7.5 VAT and consumption tax of 5%. So in some way, people are paying 12.5%. So I wanted to ask you, Mr. Latoye, how does that work? Because what you find now is a lot of people turn back. I was at a business recently, and people heard 7.5%, another 5%. Say, I don't want it again.
Service charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's going on there, Mr. Latoye?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the challenges that we are having, which I believe this the Senate committee, the Senate needs to look into critically. This fund is coming from only one purse. That is income tax on one side, VAT, value-added tax, and consumption tax from the other side. We might say, oh, yes, there are different taxes. For instance, if I have, 100,000 naira as my monthly pay, now you remove PAYE, that is pay as you earn tax, you remove that from it. So whatever rate is, let's say is 20 that you have removed, it means I have 18 naira left. Now from that 18 naira, I'm going to the market, I'm also going to pay 7.5, on that. You remove another 7.5 from it. It brings it down to 72 or thereabout. Again, you also deduct 5 naira again on the consumption tax. It brings it down to 65 or that. So you keep on deducting. What the masses are saying is that, fine, if you want to increase value-added tax from even 7.5 to 10%, reduce the income tax, because it's the same person that is paying the personal income tax as well as the value-added tax. That is the point of convergence. And it's been said over the years that, look, the indirect tax is the way to go, which is the value-added tax. Everybody understand, that is fine. But meanwhile, you have to reduce the income tax. You can't keep the income tax as the level it is, and then you're also increasing the value-added tax. It's going to reduce the purchasing power of individuals as well as businesses that are supposed to bear those taxes. And that is the challenge that everybody is facing, and that is why people are revolting. Even those are the aspects that people do not really like, just as you have clearly said. It really, depreciates the purchasing power of the masses.
Let me take this to Mr. Smarter, and I thank you, Mr. Latte, for that. So this is where we find ourselves, and that's why a lot of people have called for this tax reform, saying that it should maybe sanitize the system, because you realize that aside the unofficial taxes you're paying, even the official taxes seem to be too burdensome. And I just gave the example of the business I was at, and I saw people saying, I'm not going to purchase this thing again because of the extra taxes. So I imagine what that does eventually to the business, who is a business to make profit, but sadly because of the taxes, people are not purchasing items. So you are also part of this whole process. And I wonder for you, and we've asked time and again, what will be the most acceptable? Because there are now proposals from here and there, there'll be a lot of presentations, but what will be the most acceptable and most practicable for you as business owners and employers?
Now is a chain reaction. What is acceptable to us should also, on the long run, fuel into growth, into national growth. We cannot cut our nose to spite our face, and that is predominantly what we currently do. And someone has said, rightly so, that you cannot tax people into prosperity. You cannot overtax your citizens because you want to make revenue. Because the more of their disposable income you collect, the less the ability to buy. The lesser the ability to buy, the lesser the ability of the business to sell. The lesser the ability of the business to sell, the lesser its ability to create jobs. And the lesser its ability to create jobs, the more you fuel unemployment. The more you fuel unemployment, the more you fuel insecurity. The more you fuel insecurity, as Britain has done recently, the more you want to increase your budget for security spending. And the more you want to increase your budget for, it's a chain reaction.
The more you now tax the people.
Absolutely. So the best thing for us is this. Those multiplicities, we have challenges at the point, VAT, and consumption tax. To a large extent, they are basically the same thing. You are paying for the same thing. You are taking 7.5 legally. You are taking 5% pardon my, I'm not a legal luminary, but you're taking 5% illegally. In fact, you are harassing people to pay 5%.
That's actually what it feels
exactly.
like.
So where are we going? And we keep talking about let's harmonize these taxes, let's harmonize these levies, let's harmonize these fees. Those ones that we see, basically, as the ones we have mentioned, are the ones you see, the one you can quote, the one you can put a legal receipt to. By the time you drive from here to Shagamu, you can imagine how many junctions you see where local government towers become block the road.
Yeah,
and
there are some police to it as well.
It's more of whether you pay or you are not living. And because you just have to go, you keep parting with those 20 naira, 20 naira, you keep parting with those 200 naira,
500,
those 1,000, and then where will all those costs go? They go back to the production cost, which invariably increases the cost of production, and then it goes back to the consumer, because the consumer will always be the one to bear the brunt of all these things. So we are killing those that we are proposing to save if we don't address these issues. And as he said, pardon me, my last comment here, as he said, the biggest challenge in all this conversation, the public hearing will come and go, the bill will be passed. The biggest challenge we all face is implementation. And we just hope that the presidential committee will not be disbanded after the whole bill, but they must create a rule for them to midwife implementation. If not, like a very high-ranking government head of agency said about 2 years ago when we ran the Employers Summit, he said, look, he just doesn't understand how we are like this. That a lot of things have been put in place to make life easier for us, but you have individuals that have also proposed that, look, these things will not work. So those are the critical issues that a government have to deal with, issue of implementation.
And that is very grim, I was listening to the list of the long taxes that Nigerians have been subjected to. Don't forget the bank charges as well.
Absolutely.
All of those levies that we are subjected to paying. And of course, the increase in telecommunication service. Some would say it's another indirect form of taxation. But let's make progress on the conversation. What got us to this seeming consensus is the final agreement by the Governors Forum on sharing formula for VAT, 50% based on equality, 30% on derivation, 20% on population. What does this portend for that call at the beginning of this debate on tax reforms for economic viability, particularly for those states that do not particularly have industrial activity to generate a sizable quantum of VAT? That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, is this an end to that legal contention on the collection of VAT being a subnational responsibility? I'm starting with you, Mr. Smart. Are you ready?
Let's say your last question. Let's believe that the agreement or consensus will have put laid to rest the issue of who should collect, how it should be distributed. I think they eventually arrived at the consensus. It was all about how much more can we get, how much more can we squeeze around, and let's assume that has been resolved significantly. But the fundamental issue you raised of the first question, which was, pardon me, can you repeat, please, the first part of your question?
The agreement on 50% equality, 30% on...
and then the viability of the state.
Yeah.
Now, there was a conversation about increasing the states to creating another 31 states at a point, which I really want us to go through, because for us, the argument is neither here nor there. But it would not take away the issue of revenue. VAT is what we collect. It's still more of collecting and sharing, taking from the consumers, taking from the populace. I think there should be some level of citizens' inquiry, subnational, citizens at the subnational level, holding leadership at that level to accountability. I think we should move progressively away from the campaign of I will do this, I will do that, to how exactly are you going to do it. Hardly will you find a state in this country that is not endowed with one mineral or the other. Hardly will you find a state in this country that is not endowed with one resources or the other. And I think it's high time that citizens of those states start holding leadership to account, to say, look, How are you going to maximize these resources? You know, this rent-seeking process that we've lived off, everybody going to Abuja, you know, every month for allocation to share. I think we should progressively move away from that, and that conversation should start from the state, from the citizens of the state, to say what exactly are you bringing on board beyond what you are going to collect in Abuja.
Indeed. So we started with accountability, and it seems we're ending with accountability. We want to thank you so much. Mr. Adewale Smart-Oyorinde is the Director General, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, who has joined us here in our Lagos studio. And we've also had Mr. Aziz Alatoye, is the Vice Chairman, CITN Taxation Standards and Practice Monitoring Committee of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, who joined us virtually. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And we're not quite done with our questions on accountability. This time around, we'll be asking those questions in another way, in another sector. It's about food, the food on your table. So stay with us, we'll be right back.